Okay, we continue with Niklas Lindström and Lina Westerling. In their presentation, they will give us a walkthrough to the features and capabilities of the LIBRIS system, showing user interface and sharing the user stories which has driven the design. If I'm right, Niklas is more of a developer and Lina is more of a user experience designer. Okay, good luck.
All right, thank you. So here we are in 53. We are going to talk about the Swedish National Union Catalog upgrade, which we are currently in the process of turning into a linked data goldmine. The National Library of Sweden, as far as I know, most national libraries do collect that which is related to publishing in Sweden or in Swedish. And apart from books, have many other kinds of resources which we describe. We also coordinate and maintain LIBRIS, which is our National Library Union Catalog. And our purpose in life is to enliven bibliographical information. I think we've seen very good examples here today of what that brings to us, how that enables people to be engaged and actively participate in the information space which we contain as libraries. We also want to facilitate direct usage of data between systems and also within systems. And to enable this, we want to create a solid foundation that is applicable to various needs for different domains and different usages thereof. In more specific terms, what we need to do is to look at the data we have, and we need to challenge the way we collect and describe this information. We need to understand what that actually is, which is often easier said than done. There are all kinds of confusion about which level of specificity you have to be at when you describe something, and as you all know, this can lead to quite interesting and long-lived debates around works and expressions and things like that. What we really need to do is to connect all of this information and put it in context, find what it is related to, what it is about, what the creation processes are, and just put this into a wider context than the context of books or descriptions or records. To work with the upgrade, we have three main focuses or sub-projects, if you will, in our current work. For one, we need a new platform. We cannot use the existing library system. We need to make something which is modern and which is searchable and linkable in the modern standardized ways of RDF and related technologies. We of course need to map these things so that we can leave the Shire and find the gold elsewhere. And we need to understand how others speak, so we need to coordinate and find contemporary models of description and understand these things, because we cannot stay with the current way of thought. And of course we need user interfaces. Especially for the catalog, we have to make a new interface for editing this information, both to make it more usable and to make it fully grasp the notion of linking data instead of copying. The platform itself, which we develop, is open source. It's on GitHub, so you can look at it. I won't go into the details about how it's constructed, but you can check it out and we can talk about it outside. So this is basically the components of it. We try to reinvent as little as possible and use existing stuff and current standards. But of course we do not have the luxury of greenfield development. We exist in a very real data context where things are as they are, as you probably have seen in your other works if you work with systems in libraries. There are all kinds of data in all kinds of formats, and we don't link data, we copy data, we transform data, we funnel data, we lose track of the sources, and it's kind of a mess. And also we have the demands from various disciplines with the old ingrained terminology, and people, as I sometimes say, suffering from the Stockholm syndrome that you get when you're hostage to Mark for too long. But we have to face the modern terminology as well, and try to understand what the web, the structured web, where it is going. But being stuck in a round hole with our square pegs, it's kind of difficult to make sense of things. The MARC format is, as you know, a rather entangled hodgepodge of information. It's piecemeal and quite tricky to see consistency in over time. The meaning of things are often only interpretable if you look at some corollary information or well, at least indicators and things like that. It's hard to find things in this hodgepodge of details. And even more, it's very tricky to understand how these things are defined. I mean, we have to fully understand what kind of specific meaning was behind a certain jotting down of a title. So we have to not look at the record, but look at what is actually catalogued and what we describe in the real world, and how that relates to the cultural reality and the social contracts around what is necessary and what is useful and what is understandable. And of course RDF is the solution to that. Well, actually it's not a solution, it's a means for attempting to solve that problem. It's a foundation which creates a rather simple way of expressing data, and it allows for differences in description, and it's possible to coordinate these descriptions. You don't have to agree up front about everything. So we use that, and one of the ways to express RDF is in a syntax called JSON-LD, which is JSON for linking data, and JSON is just a simple data structure on the web. So we magically transform all of MARC into this, and then we're done, more or less. We actually do this, and our attempt is to, well, use all the bits and pieces of MARC that is useful, and we can leave very little behind in that process, and thus we have to normalize the data. To do this, we create a notation, a structured way of describing how we pick up the details and how we map them to terms. And these terms then end up in the JSON-LD representations that are coming out of the MARC records, where at least we can distinguish some kinds of things in the information. And there is a directness in expression here, so there is no related information. You know exactly what the term means. You can find it in the JSON-LD definition, and everything is based on the possibility of adding IDs as URIs to information, so you can normalize your structures and you don't have to copy in every piece of description everywhere. JSON-LD is just one of many formats of expressing the exact same information, and using this mapping of JSON-LD to terms to URIs, we derive turtle, which is a very direct representation of RDF, which you all will be able to read very soon when we've left MARC behind. I'm convinced of that. The real world, though, hasn't really come that far yet. We have all these local systems, and therefore this mapping we have in place to turn MARC into this new shape is reversible, so we can revert back into the normalized, indirected state of descriptions that is MARC. Of course, this holds us back a bit, but currently we're just creating the new foundations. So although in the future we will be able to use vocabularies in many more creative and independent ways, that is not necessary to turn back into the MARC records. This just has to be in place in order for us to still work as a union catalog, because we have all these local systems, and also of course we need to be able to export data in case anybody still wants to copy and churn and lose track of where the sources are and use our MARC elsewhere. But the real intent is to be able to create a new surface, a new interface, new ways of dealing with data, which is more direct, and where the same term is used by experts in different domains, not just librarians, but various domain experts, as the same term is used by developers. We try to connect the current gap between the IT industry and the world of domain experts, bring them together to discuss things in a common vocabulary. And now I'll hand over for a while to my colleague Lina, who will talk about our cataloging interface.
Should I borrow the... Okay. So we're going to have a look at the editing interface to the new catalog. But first, a few words on the principles driving the design. It is a web-based tool, and we wanted to make it a modern so it should be intuitive. You shouldn't have to have a handbook to be able to use the system. Having instructions for how to catalog, that's another story. But the interface itself should be self-explanatory. It should be simple as it can be, no unnecessary clutter. It should also be inspiring, because we believe that just because something is a serious administrative tool, it doesn't have to look boring. And at LIBRIS, we work extensively with a user-centered design process. I will not go into detail about that, because that will be a topic of a talk on its own. But we do have a beta up and running, which you are all welcome to try out. This is our current system, Voyager, and I'm sure you're all too familiar with these types of systems. This is the new tool. A few screenshots. Quite a different look and feel. We've actually seen during usage tests that some people confuse this to be an interface for end users as a presentation interface. And we even had to alter the design a bit because of this. From the beginning, it looked like this. You couldn't see the input fields until you clicked on something to edit it. And we chose this design because we wanted to support scanning already added data as well as adding new one. But in the end, we had to put the input fields visible from the beginning to make users understand that they're more than welcome to start editing right away. And we do use natural language instead of a code or something as a label. And what terms we use is reflected directly in the data model, as well as other vocabularies. So there's actually no distance at all, in most cases, between the raw RDF and what the user sees in the interface. And putting it out there for the librarians to use is actually a very good way of testing the data model to see if it corresponds to the librarian's reality. Also, we aim to put things where they belong logically. So, for instance, if there's a comment on language, we put it next to the language information instead of in some separate part of the user interface where there's comments about everything. So in short, the focus is on describing the material rather than on the format. So what about the data? Well, since the new model is so heavily based on linked data, we wanted to make the nature of the data very clear in the user interface. So this is what linked data looks like in the interface. It looks like a tag, and you can click on it to get the full description of the resource. In this case, it's the language Swedish. There's an icon to indicate that it's authorized. The tag can look a bit different depending on whether it's authorized or taken from a list from us or from another organization. This is how a regular string looks, just like a plain text. And if there is a thing that's not identified, it looks white and it has a dashed line to make it look like it's not as pure or true as an identified thing. So that could, for instance, be geographical subject headings. So one of the biggest challenges designing this user interface is that it needs to handle all dirty data as well as supporting the librarian in adding new data that is of high quality, i.e. linked. And in the mapping process, we put a lot of effort into normalizing the catalog, but we do know that there are some things that we will not be able to do. And also with the new model and the new interface, the deficiencies in the catalog will become more visible. So we do believe that this tool will free some time for the catalogers to put more time into actually curating or cleaning the current catalog. Yep.
So here we are in the brave new world of domains, because as I mentioned earlier, we have now created a system that uses RDF and can pick and choose vocabularies, and that might be a bit daunting. There are a bunch to choose from, and sometimes they're complementary, sometimes they overlap, sometimes they explicitly link to each other, saying that they specialize or things like that, which is great. And sometimes they sort of say that they will do that a bit later when everything is done. I think people by now should suspect that things will never be done, but that doesn't make them usable. We just have to understand what kind of social, communicative aspect of the reality we try to describe that is important, and the ways that these vocabularies capture these aspects. If you study the vocabularies, you can see that fairly clearly, because the vocabularies are often very precise in meaning and in the levels of generalization or specificity that they focus on. But they don't always look the same. So we work a lot with trying to understand what they mean, how they connect to each other, and how the structured web of data at large currently employs vocabularies and how they intend to employ them in the future. As such, we focus just as much on schema.org as we track the development of BibFrame, because we do not yet think that everything will be done and clear and the library world will just move on with one new thing of doing things. I think that we need to create an understanding and ways of mapping these descriptions that enable information to be usable beyond our context. There is, of course, a lot of difficulties in doing these mappings, and sometimes we struggle doing that, in part we cannot find the most simple structures because the data expressed in MARC isn't normalized, and it isn't clear whether a description is a description about something in between what in the WEMI model would be an expression or a manifestation. And there are a bunch of different aspects of formats in there, so it's a bit strange. But it's still very possible to express these aspects clearly. It's just that, as Lina mentioned, they will be obviously strange for the user of the cataloging interface, which is good because that might provoke actual change instead of just doing the same expressions as we've always had, creating more and more of this denormalized and odd description. So we understand that there is a lot of challenges in doing this work. MARC might be more safe in that aspect and people feel comfort in that, although the problem is that it is very structured but rather void of meaning. We prefer to look at the intention behind the structure and find terminologies that express that more succinctly. But you might end up with a bit too much convolution in your specificity, and if people have followed, for instance, the discussions on the BIB frame list, using the notion of annotations might be a bit problematic at times because you sort of indirect things there. And there are all kinds of problems around whether to reify data or use provenance and put that under the surface of the simple expressions. And we need to coordinate the perspectives of different domains and different needs. But that's just what we should do. That's the good parts of the challenge. I think we as libraries are capable of doing this, and we should do this. And if we do this, we will be able to coordinate perspectives and create clear provenance using sources directly. And by doing this, we can start to use the external data from different libraries and other sources together and adding more value to our systems. I think we all know that there are many organizations that publish linked data, and this coordination process is ongoing. We use the same vocabularies and we are able to understand each other very well. Thanks to that, and thanks to evolving standards, we are able to use things like the Sparkle query language, and with a bit of caching on top, we can actually use sources directly instead of aggregating and moving away the curation of data from the actual sources. And this is crucial because we need to be able to use data as it is. What we do is to write nice colorful code and throw that into machine and get out nice coordinated descriptions. This is a very simple application we build to navigate around the descriptions of authors. I was going to say authority records, but that's not right. It's the descriptions we have about authors, along with DBpedia, who also has descriptions about the same authors. And they also have other information, such as the influences between different authors. And we don't maintain that information, but we can still build interfaces putting all of this together so that you can both see the works of the authors that we have very detailed descriptions of, and navigate to other authors which have influenced each other. And almost everyone seems to be influenced by some classical philosopher. That might say more about the cultural bias of our cataloging content and DBpedia than the real world, but it still says something. It is almost more important, though, to understand that these technologies are not only for creating new systems between libraries internationally and do visionary new stuff. This is a very effective way to integrate internal systems, because we copy as much data between our own internal systems as we do with the outside world. By using linked data and putting the linked surfaces upon our own applications, linking them together using these technologies, we are able to make much more efficient use of our own time. So in general, we think that there are a lot of challenges even in this brand new world, but they are met at large by the initiatives ongoing today. We need to encourage the usage of all this linked data. We have put data on the web, and we have started to look at that and coordinate that, but to actually build systems that do not copy and aggregate that, but directly uses it, albeit with some caching underneath the hood, but that's just optimization. We can do lots of interesting things. We need to understand each other, and we need to understand much more rich and varied vocabularies. So we need to take charge of that information space and sort of seize the means of production as librarians and the means of consumption as well. So we need to be able to find or create or assemble platforms and tools much more efficiently, and we are starting to learn that, but we need to challenge our current systems and do something with this new technology to enable each other and share all this code as well. By doing this, we will create a more clear structure that is understandable for everybody. By that I mean basically the RDF description framework, and understanding that the different needs are capable of coexisting there, and we are able to create services upon all of this and use information between the systems much more directly, and do what we are actually supposed to do, which is to enliven and interconnect the information in the world, so that we become libraries with links inside, and that we are not just on the web but of the web, and create a clear and more useful web for everybody, so that we create a nice, albeit strangely described, world of linked realities. Things will never be perfect, but we will be able to understand that they are related in various aspects. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? We need some questions because the lunch will not start until 1 p.m. And you're being asked kindly not to be there earlier.
Okay, if you want a question, so what made you decide to start developing this by yourself instead of going to the Voyager vendor, LIBRIS, to ask them to help you with this?
We find most vendors to be fairly reactive and don't take so many risks, because they don't have a real economical incentive right now. I think that they possibly track the development of BibFrame and hope that it will be ready and done, and they can just upgrade stuff and things will work the same. Things will not work the same. And libraries need to understand and take charge of how things will work. And before we do that, it's hard to place an order if we don't really coordinate how we need to change.
Hi, Owen Stevens. In terms of expressing the library data as linked data and building the interfaces to kind of interact with it, you faced both technical and I guess kind of organisational and social problems in terms of persuading people and training people. What do you think has been the biggest challenge? Where have you met the biggest problems? Has it been technical? Has it been kind of people? And how have you overcome them? What have your strategies been?
I'd say one of the biggest problems is to I think one really cognitive problem is that humans tend to not understand things until they believe them. And it's very hard to use reasoning in that situation. So we just have to try to show the vision as clearly as possible so that they on their own make a leap of faith to actually understand that they have to change their mindset. I think that Mark feels very safe to many catalogers because it's very defined, it's very clear. So that's one challenge which we still sort of struggle with, but I think that the interfaces that we do stuff tend to make them more sympathetic to what we actually need for them to do, because they find that out on their own as we go. They understand that what does that mean really, and as soon as they no longer want the answer to be in mark fields and subfields, we have progressed. So, but we're still discussing vocabulary details.
But we've actually seen a change in the community of really like expertise catalogers, that they're becoming more and more acceptable towards this. They're even starting to appreciate it, which was maybe not the case in the beginning. And I think the main strategy is just to be open with what we're doing and to show that this is what it's going to be like. So.
Thank you. More questions? That's on the other item.
I'm Ari Rover from National Library of Finland. And in Finland we have same kind of a project. We are doing a kind of a cataloging tool for Aleph and for Voyager. And I'm just asking how many IT developers you have working with this project?
Well, 4. I think between 2 to 4, depending on we have a consultant in the team as well. So we're not many.
Are you saying some 4 full-time workers?
Right now, yes. We've been 3 to 4 people for about 2 years.
By the way, we have 1.
Right.
Did I hear right that the beta is available? It's not available now. I presume there's an Elag denial of service attack going on that address at the moment.
Okay, try to put dev in front of the cat.
Okay.
I know that one. Anybody else?
And you can log in with test.
You might want to translate this page unless you know Swedish.
Okay.
From Dresden, Saxonian States and University Library. I have a concrete question on the UI. You showed that you can assign labels to the existing data, so which draw the link to the linked data categories. Do you have some means of suggesting these values? Because you said we allow many vocabularies in parallel.
Yeah.
And it would be interesting to see how you suggest these values for tagging.
We can try with language. Looks like this. But currently it's just our own vocabularies. Not yet links to other lists.
So you start by typing string and then everything will be suggested that this is string from your own vocabulary.
Yeah, do you mean the actual properties to select new properties, or do you mean the values such as the actual language?
Okay, you can also assign properties and then...
Yeah, well, we're going to look into that, because at some point we will need to be able to allow the cataloger to specify a certain sub-property, for instance. But we use these kinds of suggestions to match both the resources to link to and to, for instance, the class or the term from a vocabulary.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
In the front.
In the front here, Ulrich. I'm just working up.
Is there an explicit desire to represent any particular workflow in the cataloging interface?
I don't understand the question.
If you think that this is a direct representation of the RDF that's underlying it, are you saying that the RDF representation is the workflow and populating that?
The RDF, you can actually access also the RDF on this tag. But you mean how the workflow, like how, what order we put?
The task, the operative person doing this, how should they relate to it? Is it a workflow that you could describe?
Well, basically, at the current stage, the workflow sort of mimics the workflow they have in Voyager. So that's basically the premise right now. And we have far too little of, linking to common patterns like verbs and things like that.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, thank you for this presentation. We continue with lunch, and at 2 o'clock workshop starts, and you're asked to go to the workshop, to the room where your workshop is taking place. And it's in the program, I guess? Yeah, it's in the program.
Yes, the workshops, you're on level 1 here. The lunch will be on level 2. It's not almost ready, not quite, so if you don't mind waiting 2 minutes or going out that way and getting some fresh air. And all the workshops are on level 3, so you need to go up 2 floors from here. And the rooms are all numbered with the workshops, so we look forward to seeing you after lunch.
All right.